More than 5 years on from the start of the Syrian crisis, refugees still continue to flee their homes, trying to seek safety in neighbouring countries. The unprecedented refugee crisis has left millions of Syrian children with little or no access to a proper education, and their lives are being shaped by violence, displacement, and a persistent lack of opportunity. But before we can discuss the education of refugees, the topic of new wars needs to be discussed. The way wars have fought has changed dramatically in the last few years. Caldor uses the term new wars to describe contemporary violent crimes. Different to previous wars that were generally fought between nation-states over political or territorial disputes, new wars typically take place in areas where authoritarian states have been weakened, with a binary distinction causing violence. Old wars were largely financed by states through taxation or outside patrons. Whilst it can be argued that new wars are sometimes motivated by economic gain, it is difficult to distinguish between those who are fighting for economic reasons and those who engage in predatory violence to finance their political cause. Caldor argues that new wars are a product of globalisation and involve fragmentation and decentralisation of the state, with Hoffman adding that globalisation is making war more dangerous. Internal conflicts are becoming more and more common, with the number of active internal conflicts going from 24 in 1997 to 29 in 2009. With New Age conflicts being less structured and fighting taking place in villages, children are being drawn into conflict. Peace Direct estimates that 250,000 children are fighting in wars all over the world, with most being recruited by force or on a false promise from escaping poverty. The crisis in Syria has left already vulnerable children at an even greater risk, with threats of child labour, early marriage, and being recruited for armed groups. Far too many children have been lost or separated from their loved ones, witnessed or experienced horrific violence, and have been left with profound emotional wounds. With a possible 2.2 million children out of education, UNICEF are worried about the psychological well-being of children. Families are marrying their daughters at an early age on the promise that they remain safe, and there are strong indications that child labour is increasing. We need to provide these children with protection against violence and exploitation, and we need to give them a good education, otherwise the hopes of an entire generation could be lost forever. As of March 2016, the war in Syria will have been going on for 5 years, and many people have fled from the conflict, but an estimated 18 million people still remain in the war-torn country. The number of those who have lost their lives is not exact, but everyone in Syria will have known people who have died. With the ongoing war in Syria and several other long-term crises in different countries, the current figure of refugees stands at approximately 20 million. It is guessed that more than half of this total is children under the age of 18, and they are forced to live in irregular situations. More than 40% of children are unable to go to school because there are fewer teachers and lots of buildings have been damaged in the fighting. The United Nations created 17 Sustainable Development Goals that aim to end poverty, fight inequality and justice, and tackle climate change by 2030. Goal 4 aims to ensure an inclusive and equitable quality of education that promotes lifelong learning opportunities for all. It is common knowledge that war is denying millions of children of an education, and this is more than true surrounding Syrian refugees. Education for All believe that education is a fundamental right for all people throughout the world, and argues that education is generally beneficial to both the individual and wider society, as it contributes to the social, economic and cultural progress of a country. Bush and Saltarelli argue that education can have both positive and negative effects, therefore creating the phrase two faces of education. They state that formal education shapes the understandings, attitudes and ultimately the behaviours of individuals. Although education can positively impact the child's life, it can also have negative consequences. Fryer, Balls and Gintis states that education systems have a direct contact with a country's children and are able to reproduce social inequalities and prejudices that marginalise groups within society. Shields argues that the dark side of education is not seen more clearly than in the violent outbreak of violent conflict. In areas of conflict, education is often used as a tool to promote further violence. Ethnic intolerance can often find its way into the classroom in many ways. Textbooks have often been distorted to normalise negative ethnic stereotypes. As in the case of Hitler's Germany, textbooks included a racist doctrine, legitimising the exclusion of the Jewish. While governments may intentionally manipulate the education system to drum up support, the role of education is imperative in preventing conflict and building peace. A quality education system makes a positive and transformative contribution to conflict-affected areas. Education provides children and their families with hope, and education is especially prized in areas of conflict. A balanced curriculum provides children with an alternative to the chaotic life they are currently living, whilst dedicated and committed teachers reinforce positive values such as the acceptance of diversity, inclusion, kindness, and considering other people's feelings. The routine of going to a supportive school and working with caring adults in a calm and easygoing environment can help to address the psychological problems UNICEF are concerned about. With the president of Liberia, Ellen Sirleaf, adding, "Education can give children hope and opportunities and heal divisions and the traumas of war." The UN High Commissioner for Refugees spoke to 80 Syrian children taking refuge in Lebanon and found that 66% were not attending school, with UNICEF estimating that a total of 2.2 million children are out of school due to the Syrian crisis. If this continues, the UNHCR argues that Syria risks ending up with an undereducated generation. In conflict areas, government spendings on education can sometimes be subject to scrutiny, therefore lowering the quality of provision. The requirement of external bodies bringing in alternative forms of education is imperative in order to avoid losing a whole generation. UNICEF launched the No Lost Generation initiative to try and tackle the issue. By the end of 2014, an estimated 1.65 million refugees fled from Syria to Lebanon, creating an education crisis that affected all. In 2014 alone, 346,500 children were supplied with access to learning opportunities. Launched in 2013, the No Lost Generation initiative works with non-government organisations, internal organisations and governments to extend access and learning skills, provide a protective environment and include support to overcome the psychological distress and trauma. Another initiative that focuses solely on educating refugees is the Can't Wait to scheme. Launched in 2012 by War Child, Can't Wait to Learn is a scheme that uses a cost-effective solution to the urgent challenges facing education for children in conflicts and emergency zones. Building on successful piloted concepts in Sudan, Can't Wait to Learn uses innovative technological solutions with a focus on gaming to engage children in education. Can't Wait to Learn is unique in the sense that children are able to learn in their own communities through a fun and interactive game that is played on a portable tablet. The game itself includes instruction, practice and a learning management system, ensuring that children are able to learn even when teachers and schools are not an option. Based on the local curriculum, Can't Wait to Learn aims to support the traditional education model in conflict-affected areas in the short term, without displacing it in the long term. Results throughout the last few years have shown that the scheme works incredibly well, with War Child stating that all children have learned greatly and their mathematics skills have improved, and that children with the lowest scores on the pre-test make the greatest progress. With the Syrian crisis getting increasingly worse, it is very important that children receive a quality education. It is evident that education is crucial in breaking the cycle of poverty and forms an important part in responding to the crisis. Education helps to combat some of the factors contributing to mass migration, extremism, and also the risk of a lost generation. Schemes like War Child's Can't Wait to Learn and UNICEF's No Lost Generation provide children and their families with hope and an escape from the horrific events that surround their everyday lives. Education fosters the mind and builds resilience, and with the assistance to protect them from violence, Syria's children will be able to build a better future for themselves, their family, and their society.